The first step of making a rod border from Willow is to kink the first stakes. So in this case, I think we're going to make a 4-rod border. So we're going to need the initial 4 rods or stakes to be kinked at the right height. So how do we know at which height to kink them? There are several different approaches for this. One approach can be simply to kink them at a height of maybe take something like a little piece of willow from the floor that you think is suitable, and just kink the first kink upon that one. Another approach is to kink if you take the thickness of the stake about 1.5 times the thickness right here, something like that. You can kink with a knife like that, or with the back of the knife, with the fingernail, and maybe sometimes if the stakes are very tough, you can actually insert the knife and twist it just like we do on a base, but usually you're not going to need it. Another approach that I have to kinking the stakes at the right height is to see at what height I actually need to kink it. I know that I'm making a 4-rod border, so suppose I'm taking this one, or maybe this one. It's going to go in front of 3. It's going first behind 1, and then in front of 3, and behind 1. So it's going to go in front of this one. It's going to be about this thick when it gets into here in front of this one. So I might find something that's about the same thickness. I think this piece of willow is good, and kink upon that. I might just kind of lay it right here like that and kink like that. This mimics the rod that will get in here eventually. So just hold it like this and kink upon that. Why is this important? Why is it important to kink those initial weavers and not just to kink them right next to the weave? Well, if I kink them right next to the wailing band, right above the wailing band, then the finishing area will not look very good, because all of the kinks along the border will be higher than this, and then the finishing area will not look so good. So if you want your work to look neat, if you want it to look even all around, you have to get the kinks at the right height. Another important thing when doing rod borders in willow is to leave the right space in the first weavers. So when I weave this first weaver here, if I just weave it like this and not leave any space here, then the last weaver that will come in here will not have any space, and it will go over it, and it will not look as neat. So I have to leave some space. But how do I know how much space to leave? Well, I can do it intuitively and just leave some space, but I can also understand the principles of what's going on in the border. And my rule is like this: the number of weavers of the border minus 3. And this is for the regular classic versions of rod border. So here we have 4 weavers minus 3, that's 1, which means I have to leave here a space for 1 weaver, right? Right here, I'm exiting here in front of this one, and in the next one right here, I have to leave a space for 1 weaver, which is about as thick as this weaver itself. So I'm thinking about this weaver, and I want to leave space for the same thickness of weaver right here. And this is the weaver that's going to enter into here. So since it's just one weaver, in a 4-rod border, we only have to do the first one in a distance. The second one doesn't need to be in a distance. We can just weave it next to the first one, right? But in a 5-rod border, since we need room for 2, we actually also need to make the first 2 woven with the space. To make things more clear, let's look at this behind 2 4-rod border and see what we've just learned. Let's look at this rod here. This rod, this weaver, exits in front of this kink here, right in front of this stake, and enters in front of this stake, enters right here. So it goes in front of 3 and then behind 1, but we only really care about the in front. This is another thing to understand. The only thing that we care about is the in front part. We don't care about the initial kinking of the stakes behind 1, 2, or 3, doesn't matter. And we don't care how many we weave behind, really. All we care about is the in front. So here we go in front of 3. Now the first one and the last one doesn't have a space, right? We go right in front of here, so we exit right next to this kink here, and we enter right next to this kink, and we join the stake right here, these two together. So we only have a space right here between this stake, this weaver, and this kinked stake right here. We left room. When we begin, we leave room for 1 because there's only one weaver that's going to enter into this space. Now, we don't actually have to leave a space for 1. We can actually leave a little bit more space. We can weave it when it's a bit more spaced, and then when we finish our work, we can pull on the stake, right? Pull on the leftover of this weaver, so that it will be in place. But we can actually take a bit more space than what we need in the beginning. Now let's look at this 5-rod border and see the difference. This side looks better. All right. Let's adjust the camera here. All right. Here, as we can see, between, let's take this one. This seems more clear to me. Let's look at this weaver right here. Between this weaver and this stake right here, this kinked stake, there are 2 weavers. So when we begin, we leave space for these 2. We exit here in front of this one, and then right here at the very next stake, we need to have space for 2, right? This is the space we have to leave, and then afterwards, when we look at this, at the distance between here and here, there's only 1 that's going to come in here. So in the first, there's going to enter, there are 2 that we need space for, and then we need space for just 1. But this one doesn't really matter. What I care about the most is this first one. When I exit from here, I want to make sure that between my weaver and the next stake, I will have room for these 2 weavers. So this, I think, makes it more clear. Now let's look at a 3-rod border and see why we don't need to leave a space. In a 3-rod border, we only go in front of 2. When we go in front of 2, what it means is that we are exiting in front of this stake right here, this kink, and entering right here with this stake. So there's not really any room that anything in which another weaver is going to enter, right? So this is why in a 3-rod border we don't leave a space. We only leave a space in 4-rod borders and above. But once again, this rule, my rule of the number of rods of the border minus 3, only applies to the classic way of making rod borders, which is going, if a weaver exits here in front of this one, it goes in front of everything except 1. But sometimes I do variations, like in this case, instead of going in front of 4 and behind 1, I might make in front of 3 and behind 2. In which case, this rule of minus 3 will not apply. Because the number, as I said, the only thing that I care about is the number of weavers we're going in front. I can also look at it like that. I can take the number of the weavers I'm going in front of, minus 2. That's another way to look at it, and this rule will always be true in any variation of rod border. And the first rule that I said only applies to the classic way of making rod borders. But most of the times we are making rod borders in the classic way, so the rule applies. Another thing that we have to understand is that since this first rod or this first weaver is woven in a space, this upright cannot be kinked upon it. So in this case, I'm going to kink it with a knife. But it's preferable to kink more than 4 stakes initially, because I understand that the first weaver is woven with a space. So when I'm doing a 4-rod border, I will kink 5. When I'm doing a 5-rod border, I will kink 7. Right? Because I actually need, I'm leaving a space for 2 more. When I'm doing a 6-rod border, I might actually kink 9 in the beginning, because I'm leaving a space for 3. The 3 first weavers are going to be woven in a space. Now, finishing a rod border in Willow can be done in the regular way, or it can be done if the material is tough and breaking easily. I will show another way to finish. But first, let's do this one regularly. Alright, so now when I have to weave this weaver into here and to exit here, I can do it in a regular way. I'm just getting in and out like that. Or I can get in and then twist the rod and get back out. And this will be easier on materials that break more easily. So now that I've done that, I might twist the rod, right? Twisting it so that's here. It's going to be twisted, And now I can get out. And the material has been twisted like that. So when you're working with tougher materials that break easily, you're going to get in, twist the material, and get back out. But here it will not be necessary. I would also prefer to choose the border according to the willow I'm working with. If the willow breaks easily, and perhaps if the willow is quite thick when I'm turning down the border, I might choose a border of more rods, 5, 6, or 7 rods, because it will be easier on the material. It will be easier to thread it in the end. It will be easier to work with like that. If I'm working with a material that breaks easily, then making something like a 3-rod border behind one and over 2 doesn't really make much sense, because it's very likely to break, right? So choose your border according to the willow that you're working with, or the material that you're working with.